Christmas in Chicago has always been cold, but this year, the chills started inside my own home. On that morning, my son Eric slammed the door in my face and said, "You're no longer family. Get out." I saw Lauren, his wife, laughing just over his shoulder. But instead of yelling, breaking down, or begging, I just nodded, grabbed my keys to the old Ford, and walked out in silence. One phone call later, and within 5 minutes every guest had quietly left their mansion, leaving Eric and Lauren standing alone at their own Christmas dinner. You're probably wondering how it all ended up this way. Let me take you back to the start, because a story like this deserves to be told from the very beginning. That same morning, I didn't have a clue my life was about to turn upside down. But I'll never forget the words that hit me like a brick. "Why can't you be more like Adam? He's a real man, Dad. He actually matters." I froze in the doorway, not sure I'd heard him right. Eric was checking his brand new Rolex, probably worth more than my yearly pension, and wearing a suit so sharp I'm sure it could cut glass. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice shaking just a bit. He rolled his eyes, just like when he was a kid and I'd asked him to pick up his socks. Only this time, there was no teenager behind that look. It was pure, grown-up contempt. "You heard me. Adam Carter has built an empire. Look at this place." He gestured with disgust at my worn-out furniture, at the old couch where I spent so many evenings helping him with his homework. "All you have is a box of tools and a house that smells like sawdust. Adam, on the other hand, has given me real opportunities. You just held me back." I could feel my blood boiling. "That box of tools put you through college," I said. "Every hour I ever worked was for you." He snorted, straightening his silk tie. "College didn't do much for me until I met Lauren and got in with the Carters. Adam's the one who showed me how the world really works. All you did was slow me down." For the first time in 40 years, my hands shook. I'd missed dinners, holidays, and weekends. My back still aches from all those double shifts I pulled so he could have a better future. "Get out," I told him, calm and steady, pointing at the front door. "Oh, please don't make a scene, Dad. I've outgrown this place, and you." He took slow, deliberate steps past me. "Maybe it's time you realize some people are just meant for bigger things." He slammed the door so hard the family photos on the mantel rattled. And just like that, I was standing alone in the quiet, staring at the ruins of everything I built for my family. My son, the same kid I taught to ride a bike, the one I cheered on at every Little League game, had just erased 4 decades of my life with a sentence. Outside, I could hear someone dragging something heavy over the driveway, but I couldn't find the energy to care. I sank into my old leather chair, the one with the hole in the arm from Eric's run-in with scissors back when he was 6. The rest of the day, I went through my routine like a ghost. Hung up my work shirt. Avoided the bathroom mirror. Didn't want to see just how much I'd aged overnight. I could still hear his words ringing in my ears. "A real man. Real money. That's what matters." And I remembered when he was 8, so proud to show off the tools set I'd given him for Christmas. "My dad builds everything himself," he used to tell his friends. When did pride turn to shame? I still remember the night I worked until 3 a.m. on a job site, just to make it in time for Eric's high school graduation, showing up in clothes stained with coffee and dust, my hands cracked and tired. After the ceremony, he hugged me and whispered, "Thanks for always being there, Dad." Those same hands he was now ashamed of. That night, sleep didn't come easy. My mind kept looping through old memories and Eric's sharp words. I stared up at the cracked ceiling, trying to remember the last time my son had called just to check on me. Not for money, not for advice, just because. The silence in my house felt bigger than ever. Even the furnace clicking on in the basement sounded lonely. I couldn't stop replaying that look on Eric's face. Not the anger I could handle, I'd seen it 1,000 times. It was the embarrassment. I'd spent my whole life thinking I was building something solid for him, something to be proud of. But now, all he saw when he looked at me was a dead end. When dawn finally broke, I sat up and stretched, joints creaking more than usual. The city outside my window was covered in a fresh layer of snow, that perfect, silent blanket that made even the roughest neighborhood look clean and peaceful. Most years, that first snow would get me humming old carols under my breath, but not this time. I shuffled into the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee, trying to stick to my routine. Habit is a stubborn thing for an old man. I pulled on my worn flannel shirt and jeans, stepped out onto the porch, and was greeted by the sharp cold of a Chicago December. Except this morning, something was off. My mailbox, the same one I'd bolted to a new post after a winter storm 4 years ago, was hanging sideways, door cracked, paint scratched. I bent down, ignoring my protesting knees, and saw it wasn't just a gust of wind or a careless neighbor. This was deliberate. A bat or a crowbar had twisted the metal. Fresh footprints in the snow, size 11, led up to the curb. Kids, I muttered, but in my gut I knew better. This wasn't random. This was someone sending a message. Back inside, I poured coffee into my favorite Cubs mug and tried to read the newspaper, but the headlines just swam in front of me. My thoughts kept drifting back to the mailbox, to Eric's words, to the feeling that yesterday's fight was only the beginning. The phone rang. I let it go 3 times before picking up, half hoping it was a telemarketer. But no. It was Eric, and he sounded almost gentle. "Dad, it's me," he said, voice smooth as polished glass. "I've been thinking about what happened. I overreacted. I said things I didn't mean." I squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles went white. After all these years, I knew when Eric was faking. "You sounded pretty sure of yourself yesterday," I said quietly. He let out a nervous laugh. "Look, I was stressed. Lauren's family can be a lot sometimes, you know. Let's not make this bigger than it is." Then, just like that, he launched into an invitation. "Lauren and I want you to come to Christmas dinner. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. Adam Carter will be there, and some business partners. Dinner's at 6. Lauren's making her roast." Something inside me screamed, "Don't go." But there's a part of every father that wants to believe in his son. So I said, "I'll be there." Eric's next words: "Maybe wear that nice suit, Dad. First impressions matter to Adam's crew." He hung up, but didn't hang up all the way. In the background, I heard Lauren's voice, muffled but clear enough. "He totally bought it. Just wait till Adam sees the contrast, your father versus the real success story. He'll eat it up." Eric laughed, cold and satisfied. "This'll seal the deal. Dad's legacy is as good as ours." My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Their apology, the invitation, it was all a setup. They wanted to parade me in front of Adam Carter and his friends, use me as proof that Eric had risen above his blue-collar roots. That's when the hurt started to turn into something else: resolve. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one they'd never forget. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just staring at nothing. My son, my own flesh and blood, had set me up to be the evening's punchline. The more I replayed those overheard words, the more my pride burned through the sadness. Lauren's voice rang in my ears. "He'll eat it up. Just wait till Adam sees the contrast." It wasn't just about me anymore. They wanted to use me to climb higher. To them, I was nothing but a prop. I walked to the living room window and looked out at my crooked mailbox, the snow undisturbed since morning. Suddenly it all clicked: the vandalism, the fake apology, the invitation to their Christmas dinner. This was psychological warfare, pure and simple. They wanted me to feel small. But I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. I spent most of that day in quiet reflection, sorting through memories and regrets. There was a photo stuck to my fridge, Eric at his high school graduation, both of us beaming. I'd worked double shifts just to afford that private school. Now, that same kid wanted to parade me in front of a room full of millionaires as living proof of what he'd overcome. By noon, my mood had shifted. The sadness was gone. In its place was a clear, focused determination. I picked up Adam Carter's business card. He'd handed it to me last year at Eric's birthday. "Call any time, Frank," he'd said. "We ought to get to know each other better." I'd appreciated Adam's directness then, and now, that straightforward approach was exactly what I needed. Maybe, just maybe, he'd want to know what kind of people he was dealing with. I spent the afternoon rehearsing what I'd say. I didn't want to sound like a bitter old man, but I also wasn't about to let Eric and Lauren get away with this. My plan was simple: tell Adam the truth. No drama, no anger. Just facts. So at exactly 4:30, I dialed Adam Carter's office. He picked up on the second ring, voice steady, just as I remembered. "Mr. Carter, this is Frank Harrison, Eric's dad," I began. "I know this is unusual, but I think you deserve to know what's happening at your own Christmas table tomorrow night." There was a pause, then Adam replied, his tone instantly serious. "I'm listening." I told him everything I'd overheard. The plan to use me as a prop. The mailbox, the setup, the fake invitation. I laid it all out, clear and calm. When I finished, Adam was quiet for a moment, then said, "Thank you for telling me. I had my doubts about Eric, but this changes things. Leave the rest to me." I hung up, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and relief. For the first time in days, I felt like I'd gotten a little of my dignity back. That night, I set my old house in order, tidied the living room, set out a fresh shirt, even baked an apple pie. If life was going to put me on display, I'd do it on my own terms. Let's see whose character shines brighter when the spotlight is on. The next evening, I drove my old Ford through the winding roads of Northbrook, heading toward Eric's place. All around me, million-dollar homes glowed with holiday lights, giant candy canes, life-sized reindeer, front yards that looked like they belonged in a Christmas movie. It was a world away from my little house on the south side of Chicago, but I kept my head high. I parked next to a silver Porsche and a black Mercedes, my humble Ford standing out like a sore thumb in that lineup. For a second, I almost laughed. My heart hammered in my chest as I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark blue suit, freshly shined shoes, hair combed just the way my late wife, Elaine, used to like it. I grabbed the homemade apple pie from the passenger seat and walked up the stone path. The front door opened before I could even knock. Eric stood in the doorway, his suit crisp, his smile cold. "Well, well. You actually showed up," he announced, loud enough for everyone inside to hear. Behind him, Lauren appeared, dressed to kill and grinning like she'd already won some private bet. I could see the dining room behind them, guests in designer clothes, glasses of wine raised, laughter echoing off marble floors. At the head of the table, Adam Carter, more impressive in person than in any photo, sat watching with calm, piercing eyes. Eric blocked the entrance, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Let's be clear, Dad. We're only doing this for Lauren's family. Tonight you're just a guest, nothing more." Before I could answer, Lauren chimed in. "Oh, come in, Frank. Don't be shy." I stepped inside, pie in hand, and took in the scene. Every eye in the room seemed to size me up and compare me to Adam. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Old carpenter's hands, a suit with a mended sleeve, and homemade pie versus their luxury watches and catered dishes. But I didn't flinch. I just smiled, handed the pie to Lauren, and thanked her for the invitation. For a moment, there was an awkward silence, broken only by Adam standing and coming to shake my hand. "Glad you could make it, Mr. Harrison," he said, voice steady and respectful. That simple gesture unsettled Eric and Lauren far more than any display of wealth could have. I took my seat at the far end of the table, head high, and waited to see what this evening had in store. They thought they'd put me on display for ridicule, but they had no idea who they were really dealing with, or what I had set in motion. Dinner started with a kind of nervous energy, the air thick with polite small talk and not so hidden glances in my direction. I sat quietly, listening. Adam Carter led the conversation, but even his presence couldn't erase the undercurrent. Everyone waited for that show they'd been promised. Lauren kept up her sparkling hostess act, floating around the table and making sure Adam's glass was always full. Eric, meanwhile, watched me like a hawk, waiting for me to embarrass myself, waiting for me to confirm the story he'd been selling for months. I looked down the table at Adam, sharp suit, cool confidence, but behind his eyes something else, calculation. I could tell he was piecing together the truth, just as I'd hoped. Dinner was served, prime rib, roasted vegetables, all the trimmings. My apple pie looked humble among the gourmet desserts, but Adam made a point of trying it first. "Frank," he said, raising his fork, "this is the best pie I've had all year. Did you bake this yourself?" All eyes shifted to me. I smiled, meeting Adam's gaze. "My late wife taught me. She always said you can't fake good food, or good character." The words hung in the air longer than I expected. Adam nodded, appreciation flashing in his eyes. The other guests murmured their approval, and suddenly the focus shifted from my so-called embarrassment to my story. Eric tried to steer the conversation back to business. "Dad used to work construction, you know. He's retired now." Lauren chimed in, trying for a laugh. "Frank's got more stories about leaky roofs than anyone needs to hear." But Adam didn't bite. Instead, he leaned forward, genuinely interested. "That's real work. My father was a machinist out in Joliet. There's something to be said for people who build things with their own hands." You could see the surprise on Eric and Lauren's faces. They hadn't counted on Adam relating to me. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Character cuts deeper than cash. Even in a room full of millionaires, honesty still meant something. By dessert, the mood in the room had shifted. Some of Lauren's relatives even asked about my projects and what Chicago was like when I was their age. Laughter came easier. The tension, at least for now, had moved from my shoulders to Eric's. Still, I knew the real fireworks hadn't started yet. Adam was just getting warmed up, and so was I. After dessert, the conversations quieted. You could feel the anticipation. Everyone in the room sensed that something big was about to happen. Adam set down his fork, glanced around, and lifted his wine glass. "If I may," Adam began, his voice commanding but calm, "I'd like to propose a toast to real family values. To the people who raised us, taught us, and worked hard for us, even if they didn't wear a suit to dinner." For a second, Eric looked pleased, thinking Adam's words were meant for him. Lauren flashed her rehearsed smile. But Adam's gaze found me, and his tone grew sharper. "There's a difference," he continued, "between people who build something with their hands, and those who build their self-worth by tearing others down. Tonight I was reminded of what matters more than money: character, loyalty, decency." A hush fell over the table. Some of the guests looked down, others studied their wine. Eric tried to laugh it off. "Well, you know how it is, Adam. Times change. These days, it's all about making the right connections." Adam's reply cut the air like a cold wind off Lake Michigan. "Connections are worthless without character." The silence was so deep I could hear the faint ticking of Lauren's designer watch. Then, as if on cue, the front door opened. More guests began to excuse themselves, one after another, gathering their coats and thanking Lauren for a lovely evening, but their eyes said otherwise. Within minutes, the elegant dining room emptied out, leaving only Adam, a few trusted partners, and my son and his wife. Eric stood, face red, voice shaking. "What's going on? Why are you all leaving?" Adam stood as well, facing Eric directly. We're leaving because I don't do business with people who disrespect their own family. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating success, but I won't be a part of a charade built on pride and manipulation. Lauren's voice was barely above a whisper. You don't understand. Adam didn't flinch. I understand perfectly. I came here for Christmas dinner, not a lesson in betrayal. He turned to me. Frank, would you join us for a real holiday meal? I think we'd all prefer your company. In that moment, I felt a quiet strength settle inside me. Eric and Lauren stared at me in disbelief, the carefully constructed world they'd built starting to crumble. I simply nodded, set my napkin down, and walked out of the room, leaving them with the silence they deserved. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud. Not because of the house, or the money, but because of the man I'd chosen to be. We stepped out into the frosty Chicago night, Adam and his colleagues by my side. The wind was biting, but I barely felt it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small, I felt seen. Adam's black SUV led a quiet parade of expensive cars through the city, but I insisted on driving my old Ford. Habit, I said with a grin. And besides, she still runs better than she looks. We drove to Adam's own house, a warm, inviting place on the edge of the city, where the decorations were simple but genuine. Inside, the kitchen was already buzzing. Adam's wife, Julia, welcomed everyone like old friends, and his teenage son gave me a nod of respect you can't fake. The atmosphere was different here, no forced smiles, no competition. Adam's friends, all successful in their own ways, asked about my life, my building days, even about Elaine's famous pie. I was just Frank, not the prop, not the lesson, just a man among equals. Over dinner, conversation flowed easily. We shared stories of tough winters, hard-earned victories, and the people who taught us what mattered. Adam's wife brought out a homemade casserole, and I noticed that more than one guest reached for seconds of my apple pie. Later, Adam pulled me aside. Frank, thank you for your honesty. You reminded all of us tonight that it's not what you own, it's who you are that matters. I nodded, grateful but still a little overwhelmed. Sometimes it takes losing almost everything to see what you really have, I admitted. Adam's eyes softened. Eric and Lauren will have to live with the choices they made. But you, tonight, you set the record straight for everyone. As the evening wound down, I looked around at the laughter, the genuine connection, the warmth of real hospitality. For the first time in a long time, I felt at home. I realized something important. Sometimes the family you need is the one you find, not the one you're born with. The next morning, Chicago woke to a quiet snowfall. I sipped coffee in Adam's kitchen, watching the flakes drift past the window, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. My phone buzzed. 10 missed calls from Eric. A few from Lauren. I ignored them all. Later, as I packed up my things to leave, Adam's wife handed me a container of leftovers and a handwritten note. You're welcome here any time. Merry Christmas, Frank. I thanked her, and shook Adam's hand. He pressed a business card into my palm. Don't be a stranger, Frank. If you ever need anything, work, company, a friend, you call. On the way home, my phone rang again. This time I answered. Eric's voice was thin, desperate. Dad, you have to come back. You have to fix this. Adam cut me out of everything. Lauren's family is furious. We lost everything, because of you. I pulled over, letting the engine idle. I could hear Lauren in the background pleading. For years, I'd imagined a moment like this. My son finally needing me, finally realizing what he'd thrown away. But now, I just felt tired. Eric, I said, my voice steady, all I ever wanted was your respect. You chose money over family, and you lost both. Maybe it's time you learn how to build something on your own. He tried to argue, but I didn't listen. I hope you find your way, son. But I won't be anyone's scapegoat anymore. I hung up and let the silence wash over me. I'd always believed a father's love meant fixing things, bailing your child out, smoothing over mistakes. But sometimes, real love means letting them face the storm they created. As I pulled into my own driveway, I realized how much lighter I felt. The old mailbox, battered but still standing, looked almost heroic against the snowy street. I patted its cold metal with a smile. For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was, and I was proud of it. Christmas night found me back in my own little house on the south side, alone but not lonely. I set Adam's casserole in the oven, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window to watch the snow blanket the world outside. As I looked around my modest living room, old photos, hand-built shelves, a faded Christmas tree, I felt a kind of warmth that no expensive mansion could ever offer. For decades, I'd measured my worth by what I could give to my son. But tonight, I finally understood, a man's value is not in his bank account, but in his character, his honesty, and his resilience. That night, neighbors stopped by with cookies, and I invited them in. We shared stories, laughter, and the last slices of apple pie. There was no judgment, no keeping score, just simple, genuine kindness. Later, I found the old toolbox Eric had once been so proud of. I placed it on the table and ran my hand over its dented lid, smiling at the memories. Maybe Eric would come around someday. Maybe he wouldn't. That part was no longer up to me. As the evening wound down, I stepped outside to take in the night air. The city was silent, Christmas lights twinkling in the distance, and my heart finally felt light. I realized that sometimes, losing everything you thought you needed is the only way to find out what truly matters. Friends, neighbors, and the simple dignity of a life well lived, these were the treasures no one could take from me. And if my story ever found its way into the world, I'd want folks to know. Real wealth is built on character. Family is chosen by the heart. And the happiest ending is being able to look in the mirror and respect the person you see. Merry Christmas, from Grandpa Frank Harrison. And may you always have the courage to stand tall, even when the world tries to shrink you.